Hi everyone, my name is Capria, and I want to talk about some things that you can do right now to really dive into the policy and macro social work space. So, a lot of people are very interested in getting into this work, and I think there's a lot of things that you can do right now. So, I want to talk about things that you can read, things that you can write, and activities you can participate in right now that can really kind of help you launch and transition into this work. So, first, I want to talk about reading. So, in the policy space, we tend to read a lot. We tend to read long, heavy, dense documents all the time. So, hopefully, you like reading. But there's a couple different types of materials that you'll probably want to start digging into. And this reading, part of the reason we read is because we want to be up to date as much as possible on what's going on in the field. So, whether that's across government in general, whether that's a specific area like child welfare, you want to know what's being discussed in the field, and what are they saying in current literature, current policy analysis, and memos that are being published. So, some sources or types of materials you can read. You definitely want to try to tap into some newspapers. So ideally, some more neutral papers like AP Associated Press or Reuters can be helpful to again understand what is going on within the current administration or across the country. You might also look into some local newspapers, depending on your interests and your policy areas of interest. You also probably want to tap into some of the policy organizations that are publishing. So oftentimes, both the state and local level as well as nationally, there are other policy organizations that are publishing briefs, memos, reports, data dashboards about different policy issues. So you have like the Children's Defense Fund, the NAMI, the National Association of Social Workers that are putting out materials about different policy issues. So they can be helpful to understand what's going on as well, particularly if you don't have the time or maybe don't feel as confident to read the direct legislation, regulations, or rules yourself. So one source of material could be the policies themselves. So let's say you wanted to read the big beautiful bill. You can go to congress.gov and read that, or you can go to the Federal Register and read the rules that are being proposed or implemented. But oftentimes those documents tend to be dense or complex and can be hard to interpret. And so policy organizations, oftentimes will do analysis, summarize that information, or summarizing the impacts of those legislation. Because you might have a bill, but the bill just tells you like what are the rules being passed. An organization like a national organization or nonprofit might tell you this is what the bill has, this is what the anticipated impact of that bill will be. And so that helps you really understand kind of the analysis part. Like you can't really get that from the bill itself oftentimes. And so you have to look at other sources or obviously draw your own conclusions about like the actual impact of this legislation or rule or other, document. So those are types of things you can read in addition to policy research and think tank organizations. So your Urban Institute, Brookings, Heritage, Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, they put out materials. So you can read from these think tanks to understand how they're talking about these policy issues. And that can be really important for a lot of reasons. Number one, understanding how the field is discussing these issues or understanding how specific political leanings are talking about these issues. So if you want to understand how more conservative think tanks are talking about an issue versus how more left-leaning think tanks are talking about an issue, then you can read their materials to really understand that, which I think is important too, because you want to understand and know how are kind of the leaders in the field talking about different issues from housing and energy, environment, and other things. So reading is definitely going to be helpful, and reading will also help you feel more confident because ultimately, like as you start to read, it'll be repetitive as you start to look into certain materials, and so you'll feel more confident in understanding like this is how, they're talking about child welfare in the policy space, or this is how they're discussing housing and housing affordability, and housing policy research think tanks and nonprofits. So it's really all just about building that confidence. Next, I'll talk about writing. So writing is also super important in the policy space, because as we just talked about, the materials that are being written, the analyses and summaries that are being done, like these are typically done by analysts or other, policy professionals. And so you have to be able to articulate and communicate, again, what does this bill or this rule mean for the people who are affected by it. So building those writing skills, I think, are especially helpful. And there are a couple of different things you can do in the writing space. Specifically, you can write like general policy papers or letters or memos. You can, post them in a blog. You can submit them to be published as op-eds or in articles, or, even a peer-reviewed journal if that's the direction you'd like to go, as far as like how you want the material to be organized and presented. But essentially, all of this in an effort to really demonstrate your competency and your expertise and your analysis of policy issues. You can also write to elected officials. So if you want to write to legislators or city council or state senators or another group, you also have that ability as well. Again, all in the hopes to really start to build your ability to write and craft materials that can really articulate a policy issue and your position on it. And so I think another reason this is helpful too is oftentimes policy jobs will ask for writing samples, and typically they want a policy writing sample. And sometimes they tend to be very flexible in what that sample could be. And so these could serve as a potential writing sample, depending on the job, what the application is asking for, because sometimes they may ask for a more formal writing brief or policy memo. And I'll talk about that too in a second. But all of that to say, like, either way, like you want to start building that muscle to writing, like from a policy lens. And so definitely encourage people to start writing if you are comfortable with that. And then I want to talk about things you can do, activities you can participate in. So I think back to keeping with the current events and what's going on right now in the field, there are different activities that you can do that will be helpful for that. First and foremost, getting engaged in different activities, conferences, roundtables, convenings, attending webinars. I think those are all very helpful. And then lobbying and advocacy days are also other options as well. And I'll talk about the conferences and then the advocacy days. So conferences, there are organizations like there's the Association for Public Policy Analysis and Management that, hosts a conference every year where I know many of my colleagues go to talk about the policy work that we're doing. So we also go to the Child Welfare League of America and other conferences. And so there are many conferences, many more than I even know about, that policy professionals and our partners all go to share about our work in the policy space. And so joining or attending these conferences is definitely ideal. Some of these organizations have scholarships to attend their conferences. And so, I definitely encourage people to do some research on what conferences might align with their interests, whether they have scholarships or fellowships to help students or other young professionals or other, individuals who may have financial constraints be able to attend. But all of that to say that there are lots out there. And so it might be helpful to look and see who's doing, who's hosting conferences around childcare policy, and then go through that list and see which ones might align with your interests or your abilities. There could be a conference near you. So then I'll talk about lobbying and advocacy day. So as I mentioned earlier, organizations like the National Association of Social Workers, they, create policy, they do analysis, they do lobbying day. that's an opportunity to really get deep into the weeds on like policy analysis, legislative analysis, and lobbying, etc. Because this is really an opportunity for you to examine, legislation, bills that are being proposed, and really talk about what it's the same thing. It's summarizing. What does this bill say? It's the analysis. What is the potential or anticipated impact of this legislation? And really talking through that or presenting an argument for or against it to your legislators or to your representatives. And so it's a great opportunity to really dig into like the actual like engaging in policy analysis and policy work. So I definitely encourage individuals to do that, either again as part of a lobbying day or just on your own. And then I'll say fellowships is another really good opportunity. So there are lots of policy and government and advocacy fellowships out there. There are many more than I am aware of. And there are databases like profellow.com. You can also go to Indeed or Idealist to look and see where fellowships are going on. They're in person, they're virtual, they're 6 months, they're 2 years. And so there's lots of different ones. There's some in the governor's office, mayor's office, city council, the county government office, etc. And so when I was talking earlier about creating those formal briefs, these fellowships oftentimes require fellows to create a written product as a final project or product of your fellowship. And so oftentimes people do create white papers or proposals, policy papers or memos as part of their fellowship participation. And so then you have that writing sample to submit to future job applications. So I definitely encourage people to look into fellowships if possible. And the last thing, two last things I'll say. The first is that this is just some examples, some suggestions. There's lots of other things you can do. You can create a YouTube where every YouTube video you talk about different policy issues, or a TikTok where you talk about different policy issues. So you might talk about housing affordability. You might talk about housing unit availability. You might talk about the misalignment between wages and median house the median house costs. And so you could do TikToks about those different policy things like in a series. And so all of that to say, there are so many different things that you can do to share your expertise or your thoughts about policy issues with the world. And my second point, somewhat related, is that I definitely encourage people to just to jump in. And I know that's easier said than done. But I think part of it is something that I have learned and realized and, have to acknowledge in the field, is that there is so much policy stuff out there that none of us know it all. Like the policy experts, the policy professionals, like we are all still learning. We don't know everything. We don't know every rule, regulation, law, etc. related to our policy issues, or we don't always understand all of the nuances, connections, etc., the historical information behind things. There is too much information out there for most of us to really be able to digest. So all of that to say, like, you don't have to know everything. You can share your expertise, you can share your thoughts, your ideas, with the acknowledgement or awareness that there may be information out there related to what you're talking about and you haven't found it yet. And that's okay. All of that to say that I just encourage people to just feel confident in what you do know. Like, your experiences, your perspectives are valid and, worthy of being shared. And so just encourage people to just go out there, find what works for you, whether that's talking to people at conferences or whether that's writing a blog online. Like, find whatever feels good to you to be able to share your expertise in the world. But I'm always available for people who want to talk, bounce ideas off of, because that's what we do in the policy space. We bounce ideas off of each other. But just encourage people to just go out and do what feels right to them. But thank you all for listening.